Good evening, everyone. Once again, we are back. I am Laquita Joseph with Copper Penny Coaching, and tonight we are talking about managing conflict in marriage. So, we know that there is always going to be conflict in marriage. So, if you don't believe that, then you are living on a different planet because there is absolutely going to be conflict. There is no way, no how that you would ever, never, ever, ever avoid having some sort of conflict in your relationship. It's just going to happen. So, tonight, what I want to do is talk about some conflict resolution skills that you could develop as a couple, and then also how you can resolve the conflict in your relationship. So, before I jump into all of this great content, I just want to say good evening to all of you who are out there. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am so excited to be here once again. Again, I want to remind you that I'm here on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can always catch me here to find some great tips and great skills and advice regarding your marriage. Or if you're engaged, so maybe you're contemplating getting married and you've already, you're engaged and you've popped the question or someone has popped the question to you. And so you want to come here and get a great jump start on your relationship. And this is a great place to start. So I just want to thank you. And so let's go ahead and get started. So I've had several of these Facebook Lives. And one of them, I really talked about communication skills. And so talking about conflict management, it is really another element or a subset of communication skills, because being able to manage conflict requires some level of communication. You and your spouse will need to work together to be able to do this. So some of the things I want to just start off by saying: one, you have to learn how to fight fair. So you're going to fight, right? You're going to fight. There's going to be arguments, but you need to fight fair. You know, that means when I say to fight fair, that means you want to avoid criticizing each other. So don't be critical, and don't be defensive always every time your spouse brings up something to you. You know, you want to listen and be attentive to that, to gain better understanding of what they are seeing, how they are feeling about the situation. So definitely don't be defensive. And also, this is another term, and I've talked about this before. It's called stonewalling, and basically where you just decide that you're not going to respond, you're not going to do anything. You know, you may give the silent treatment and all these various things whenever, you know, some sort of issue comes about and your spouse wants to talk about it, or you just really need to deal with it. So fight fair. You know, it's okay for you to vent. There's no problem with venting. There is no problem with having frustrations, because you're going to be frustrated. And yes, you might vent to them and be mad about certain things, but it's just the way that you go about dealing with those things that's important. You know, so you want to be constructive in what you're saying. The other thing, you want to be willing to say, I'm sorry, and do it quickly, because it's inevitable. You're going to do something that's going to offend them. So say, I'm sorry. Don't get hung up on that. And then also, sometimes as adults, not just children, we might need to take a time out, because if we feel like we have gotten really heated, this particular topic or this subject has gotten us riled up, then we need to take a time out, you know, before it gets out of hand, out of control, you know, to calm yourself down, to think about what it is that you really want to say and what you really are trying to communicate to your spouse. So be careful with those things. So take the time out. You know, you might need to just say, I'm going to go have me a glass of wine, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about this. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't blame each other. So there are things that are going to happen, but don't blame one over the other for whatever the situation is. Because when you blame someone, it makes it very personal and they feel like you are attacking them. There's an attack against them as a person. And so you don't want to do that. Also, the other thing is when you start to have conflict and you're talking through conflict, then you want to use I statements versus you statements. Because what that means is, you just really want to express how the situation is affecting you without blaming them, because that blame goes hand in hand with when you say you, because if you use the word you did this or you did not do this, then it is sounding like you are blaming your spouse for whatever this situation is. But if you can change the context of how you start that conversation and say, I felt disrespected when you did this. It's very different than saying you disrespected me. And it's very psychological, right? So it is very psychological, and relationships are psychological. So a lot of things that happen is because of what happens in our mind and what we think about what people are saying to us or saying about us in a roundabout way. So we should choose our words wisely. And then also use touch, physical touch. You have to touch each other because that can calm down a situation, basically. So if you touch them, a gentle touch can really change the whole situation. So whereas someone is intense, they're upset, they're angry, but if you could just reach out and touch them, grab their hand, maybe even just grab them and hug them, it can change the way that conversation is going so that it does not get escalated and it's not as heated or intense. So that's one of some tactics, some quick hit tactics that you can use to approach when you're having conflict in your relationship. So, conflict resolution skills, sometimes become innate to certain people, right? So there are certain people who are by nature are very calm, they're very laid back, they're very relaxed. And so when conflict comes, then sometimes that easygoing personality that they have makes it easy to deal with the conflict. Because if you have two heated people, let's be honest, if both are heated, on fire, and one says something and the other one has something to go back at it and you keep going back and forth, now you have two hot-headed people who are not hearing or listening to what the other person is saying at all, right? So you want to be, but those things are innate, so you can't change that, right? So certain people are just who we are. I admit I can be very heated and hot-headed at times, and especially when I was younger. So certain things you have to consider, so when you're younger, you're more spirited and you're more outgoing and carefree, and you're in control of yourself and your life, so sometimes we can allow those things to get out of control, and so we tend to portray it outwardly, and as a result we could be in some heated conversations with our loved one. And so just think about if the two of you, both of you have that same type of spirit, then it's very hard and difficult for anyone to hear anything that the other person is trying to say. So, some couples also had good role models. So maybe some couples had role models of people that they knew that were married, and this is how they handled their conflicts. They were really calm. They talked things out. And others may have had, role models who, they argued it out. You fussed each other out until you couldn't fuss no more, So if you know what I mean by that, fussing somebody out, that's just how it is, in some cultures, some of our families, we just do that. So it is what it is. Um, but, at the end of the day, what is consistent is that all couples have arguments and all couples have disagreements. So no matter what anyone tells you, no matter what it looks like on the outside, everybody goes through something. Everyone, every couple, no matter what. It may not be as big or large as what another couple may go through, but it's inevitable. They are going to go through something because conflict is common in marriage. I'll repeat that. Conflict is common in marriage. So I don't want you to miss that point, okay? So then you say, how do I resolve the conflict? How to resolve conflict. So there are 6 steps to resolving conflict that I'm going to take you through and we're going to talk about this evening. Okay, step 1. You have to, first of all, know, accept, and adjust your differences. Know, accept, and adjust your differences. So that means you have to know what is different between the two of you. That means you have to know each other, get to know each other. That's all about building the relationship. When you have those deep, intimate conversations, when you're talking about your life values, what your morals are like, and what do you value, that's where you are identifying the differences in your relationship. And so you should know what those differences are, because in order to be able to accept or even to adjust yourself to whatever the difference is, you got to know what it is. And so you have to know how wide of a gap you and your spouse are in between that particular situation, that issue, that thing, or that thought, or that belief. Any of those things you have to know in advance, or else you cannot adjust to it, you can't accept it, or any of that stuff without knowing what it is. So you first must know what it is. Some people are low pace, some people are fast paced, they get it done quickly, and other people may take a little bit more time to work through situations. You and your spouse may have differences in how you approach things. He might, he don't move fast enough for me. He's like, hey, she always on the go. She moved too fast. I need a moment. I need to think it through. So those are differences that you could have in a relationship. So now you've identified that you're on 2 different spectrums of that. Now you need to talk about how is it that we can adjust. Either I'm going to accept this as a difference and we're going to move on, or we say, this is too big of a difference, too big of a gap. And so we need to figure out how we can adjust our styles so that we can come closer together, so that we can deal with things in a manner where both of us will be comfortable. And so that is one of the things you have to work through when you're dealing with conflict and resolving conflict. The truth of the matter is you are different. What they say, the saying is opposites attract. Well, that's true. Opposites do attract. And when they attract, initially you're like, oh, we're so lovey-dovey. Everything is so great. But the truth is opposites do attract. And so there are differences amongst the two of you. And so there are bound to be issues as a result of you coming together as a unit. And so identify them and accept them. Step number 2, you cannot be selfish. I know. Listen, I'm an only child. So I must say this. As the only child, I know it can be hard to not be selfish. So I can be selfish because I'm used to having everything is mine. When I was growing up, I guess I should say, when I was growing up, it was all mine. I'm used to things being done a certain way. Things are always where I leave them at. And so for me, I just know how that really feels. And so, but you cannot be selfish in the sense of deciding that you're going to just do your own thing, that you're going to do whatever you want to do in this relationship, if it don't work the way that you think it should be working, that, it doesn't matter because, your way is the right way. Doesn't matter what your spouse thinks about it. You're just going to do what you, or do you, right? Do you is what we say. But it's not the right approach if you're in a relationship with someone else, because they could very well do the same thing. And what we're talking about here is a marriage. And when you come into a marriage, you have agreed to work together as a team. You're a unit now. That's what you vowed to do, is you became a team. You came together for each other. And so you cannot just operate just on your own accord because you felt like it. So that you need to take a look at those things and do it differently. So sometimes you got to give up yourself and put your spouse before you. And so if you think about it, if both of you are giving up yourself and putting the other one first, then everybody is winning, right? I mean, do you get that? Let me say it again. You have to give up yourself for your spouse. And if both of you are giving up yourself for the other person, then you're both winning. So how could you lose there? So I would say to you that absolutely 100% that you have to be willing to sacrifice yourself for your spouse. You cannot be selfish if you want this relationship to work. You have to give up your will. That's just how it is. And then as a Christian, I will go there. As a Christian, you have given up your will to Christ. And so it's the same thing. You have vowed, you have a relationship, and you're in a relationship with Jesus. And so you have given up your own will for him. And so in the same vein, in your marriage, in your relationship here, you are saying, I'm giving up my own will to my spouse, but you're doing it for each other. So it's a win-win. Okay, step 3. You need to pursue your spouse. And so that means, like, if you're in an argument, you're going through something, you need to be willing to be the first person to say, I'm sorry, or whatever it needs to happen, instead of sitting back and waiting for them to take the first step. Pursue them. You go after them. You want to make it right. Because if you're both trying to make it right, that means there are two people working on the same team who are trying to accomplish the same thing. You're going after the same exact thing with each other. You're not waiting for the other person. And so you should be sitting there where the two of you are coming after each other to say, hey, I'm sorry. And the other one is saying, I'm sorry. And now you're able you're softening the blow of whatever the conflict is that's going on in the relationship, and you're coming together and you're fixing it. You're working together to fix it. That's the key here, is that you have to be willing to work together to fix it. And then when you do this, I don't want you to feel like you're like totally like setting aside, your heart, losing your heart, your own hope, but knowing that this makes everything possible in your relationship. You're not giving up hope. You are just saying, you know what? I'm in it for the good of the relationship. That my relationship, our relationship, is so important to me that I am willing to give this up so that we can have it. And we do it all the time for our children, right? So we can see how to do that for our child. And so in our relationship with our spouse, we should also be willing to do the same thing. That we are willing to sacrifice for the good of our children. We should be willing to sacrifice for the good of our marriage. All right? Step number 4. You should have loving confrontations. So instead of arguing, we don't want any fighting. I pray that no one is actually physically fighting, because, we don't want that at all. But when it comes to fighting, meaning, there's conflict and there's arguing and things of that nature, we should be having loving confrontations. And what I mean by that is, you're having a disagreement with your spouse. This is someone who you feel loves you, right? You love each other. And when you love each other, that person is your friend. And so if you truly know and understand that this person is your friend, whether you disagree with them or not, you should still be able to have a loving confrontation because you have love that's deep rooted in your heart for this person. So regardless of the fact that you may not agree on a certain subject or a certain topic, that's not going to derail or change the fact that this person loves you and you love them back and that you are all into this relationship. Having a loving confrontation, because someone who loves you, they're your friend, they will listen to what you have to say. They will seek to understand your position and where you're coming from on the issue. And they will work through the problem or the conflict with you because they believe in you and in your relationship, and it's worth it for them. If they are not doing that, then they may not see that it's worth it for them. They don't see the value in the relationship at all, So those are things that you have to address in a relationship because they should be your friend and you should have loving confrontations. You should be able to voice your position and without you all feeling like now all of a sudden you hate each other and this person is not for you or anything like that. You must have grace and be tactful. Have grace and be tactful because grace requires wisdom, it requires patience, and it requires humility. And so if you can come before each other with those three things, right? Come before each other with those three things as a couple, you can resolve any conflict that you may have. Your spouse is going to speak the truth to you. They are like your mirror. So when you want to see what's really being reflected, what you are reflecting out, your spouse is the person who can give that to you and who can give it to you in all honesty. And you should be able to receive it from them in all honesty because they know you. You know each other. It should not be a situation of being offended or offensive to anyone. You're a team. You're working together. They are there to make you better. And so you should actually do and have loving confrontations. All right. I see an amen out there. Yes, amen. The fifth step is you have to be willing to forgive. You have to be willing to forgive each other, right? Because it's inevitable. Nobody is perfect. If you think you're perfect, I don't know where you're living at, but nobody is perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody I know is perfect. I'm going to be honest. We're going to make mistakes. We have made mistakes. We have said things that have been wrong, and we will say things that will be wrong in the future. It's not like it's a one-time deal and it'll never happen again. That's not real. I'm being real. What's real is that there are going to be times when they are going to say or do things that might hurt you or be offensive to you. And when they do, you still should be willing to forgive because in return, you're going to do things, say things that's going to offend them too. And you would want to give them the same grace that you would want them to extend to you. So be willing to forgive no matter what. I don't care if you think you have the best relationship in the world. It is bound to happen. You will offend each other. And the only way to come about that is to say to forgive them. It's going to happen. You can't take it back, right? Once it's out there, it's out there. You can't take it back. So then you have to say, I'm sorry. And be willing to do that. And so not only do you should you ask for forgiveness, but you should be willing to grant forgiveness. Because I think, a lot of times with couples, we want the other person to forgive us. We want them to forgive us for whatever we've done. But we are sometimes, I'm not going to say all the times, but Sometimes we are slow to forgive the other person. We want to hang on to that and hold it over their head and all these type of things for a long time. But you should be willing to forgive just as much and as quickly as you want them to forgive you. You know, be open, be intimate with each other to build a happy relationship. And then when you're open and intimate with each other, then you will be quick to forgive. You know, that's second nature. You know, it becomes common in your relationship and how you deal with conflict in the marriage. You cannot harbor resentment. So you can't hold on to things and past hurts or things like that. You cannot harbor those things. Those things will eat away at you. It will eat away at the relationship if you continue to harbor on things that have happened in the past and hold on to thoughts and things that angered you, that made you feel resentful towards your spouse. Don't do it. You know, should not make them pay for everything or the wrong that they have done to you. You know, like you done me wrong, you're going to pay for this. No, this is your spouse. This is your husband. This is your wife. You know, they're not some person on the street. They're not some stranger, you know, or anyone like that. This is a person that you committed your life to. This is a person that you live in the same household with, that you see every day, every morning. You should not treat them that way. And it does take practice, take time, because sometimes we just don't come naturally equipped with the skills and the tools to just forgive and to do those things for somebody. But you have to. It's something that you have to practice. You have to work on your marriage every single day. Every day you should be working on that marriage and your relationship, because you know what? If you don't work on your marriage, then you won't have a marriage to work on. So you have to work on it every single day because you're building this relationship. It's worth it. So that's what you should be doing. The sixth step is you don't want to go tit for tat. So that just means if they get out of control and they start arguing, fussing, or they, say something that offends you or is bad or you don't like it, that doesn't mean that you go all in and you go back in on them like that. You know, when they go low, you go high, right? They go low, you go high. Because all it does is fuel the fire. So once one person says it, now you say it, now you've gotten into them, now they got to one-up you. Now they going to try to see if they can say something that's going to be worse than what you said. Now you got to say something else that you feel like it's going to be worse than what they said. And now you're in a situation where you're intentionally trying to see who can hurt each other the worst. And what is that? That's not a marriage. That's not what you do in marriage. You should not be trying to break each other down. You should not be saying things that's going to destroy the other person, destroy their spirit, their confidence, or anything, because the truth is words do hurt. I don't care what they say. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words do hurt, and they stick around forever because they're in your head, right? And that's the biggest issue. Your mental, you can take a butt whooping and move on and never even think about it again. But words will stick in your brain. What somebody said to you, how they said it to you will stick in your brain. So you don't want to go there. So don't go tit for tat. It just doesn't work. You don't need to retaliate against them for anything. Blow for blow. You don't want to lash out at them. You want to try to seek peace and forgiveness. Peace and forgiveness. Because that's the only way to have that loving relationship that you desire. And I know everyone out there is desiring a loving relationship where you're able to communicate with your spouse, you're able to be honest with your spouse, you're able to share your disagreements with your spouse. That's what conflict is. It's all about your differences and disagreements, where you make conflict with each other. Conflict is like being the opposite of the other thing. I don't agree with that. I agree with this, and it's something different. And this is where relationships tend to break down, is with conflict. And that's because we bring out, all sorts of criticism. We criticize each other. We talk ugly to each other. And it just makes things worse, and it compiles, and especially over time. So over time, you are doing these things to each other, and it can break down the relationship. These are things that tear it down. It tears down the spirit of the person. They feel worthless. They don't feel worthy. They don't feel like you care enough about them or enough about your relationship if you're able to harbor these feelings and attack them in such a way. So we have to be careful about how we deal with conflict. But we must also know and understand that conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen, but we have to know how to manage it. So you should not be quick to think about how to exit the relationship because you all don't agree on certain things. We basically tolerate conflict in all sorts of situations. We deal with conflict on our jobs, and we go in and we slave and work hard and do all sorts of things in a job, in the workplace that we don't agree with, but we do it anyway, right? So then why can we not give the same grace and respect to our spouses in our relationship to make sure that we are consistent in our relationship and build that up and give them the benefit of the doubt, the same doubt that we give to our employers, that we give to other people, all sorts of situations we do that. We should have that same level of respect and commitment in our marriage. So that concludes, and I just want you to know it can be done. You can resolve conflict in your marriage. People do it all the time. I know there are like 50% of folks or 50% of marriages that end in divorce, right? 50% of all marriages end in divorce, but they don't have to, because we just need to develop the skills that we need to be able to manage the relationships. There was a reason why the two of you came together. You decided on the commitment with each other. And so you should work on it. You should work on your marriage and work to learn to resolve conflict. So if you are out there and maybe you're struggling in your relationship and you need some support, some help to help you and your spouse through your situation, then reach out to me. Visit my website. Again, I'm Laquita Joseph of Copper Penny Coaching. And so what I do is I help couples turn their failing marriages into flourishing and loving relationships full of appreciation, understanding, and passion. So if you're looking for that, you want a solid relationship, you know you can have it, you and your spouse both want it, then reach out. My website is www.copperpennycoaching.com. Simple as that. copperpennycoaching.com. You can find me here on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter. Thank you so much, and I thank you for listening tonight, and I look to see you next week, same time, same place. Good night.